She was already there, waiting like a shadow at the edge of the bus stop, arms crossed, lips pressed thin, her stare sharp enough to cut through glass. The school bus slowed, brakes screeching against the quiet of the street. My daughter's small hand tightened around the strap of her backpack, but her feet froze the moment she saw Karen blocking the way. The first kids stepped off, their sneakers slapping against the pavement. They glanced at her wide-eyed, sensing the storm before it hit. And then it did. "You don't belong here," Karen snapped, leaning down so her voice struck like a whip. "This neighborhood has rules." The words stabbed deeper than she probably realized. My little girl blinked, confusion swirling in her eyes, her mouth opening as if to answer, but nothing came. The other kids shuffled back, hesitant, whispering to one another, like they were watching some kind of show they'd seen before but never dared interrupt. From across the street, I watched it all unfold through my windshield. My pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the kind of rage only a father knows when someone dares to touch his child's peace. Karen straightened, waving a paper in the air like it was a weapon, her voice growing louder, making sure every parent in earshot could hear. "Next time, don't even bother getting on this bus. I'll have you banned from the school. You don't belong in this neighborhood. Neither does your father." Murmurs rippled through the small crowd. Some parents pulled their kids closer. None of them stepped forward. That was her power, a wall of intimidation built on volume and arrogance. I opened my car door slowly, every movement deliberate. She didn't notice. She was too busy towering over a child who barely came up to her waist, too busy feeding on the silence of everyone else. My daughter's eyes met mine across the street. Fear glimmered there, but so did trust. I gave her the smallest nod, the kind that says, "It's going to be okay, Daddy, here." Karen followed her gaze and finally spotted me crossing. Her lips curled like she'd been waiting for this moment. She jabbed her finger at me and shrieked, "There he is! That's the man, a criminal! I'm calling the cops right now!" Her voice carried over the block, shrill and triumphant. Parents gasped, phones tilted up, ready to record. Kids clutched their backpacks tighter. I didn't flinch. I didn't shout. I just kept walking, slow, steady, my eyes locked on her as if each step was another nail in the coffin she was building for herself. She fumbled for her phone, her words sharp enough to pierce the quiet. "Yes, officer, you need to get here now. There's a dangerous man at the bus stop. He's threatening children." Theatrics, pure theatrics. She spun in a circle like an actress on stage, making sure everyone saw her panic, her fake fear. She wanted an audience. She got one. My daughter clung to my side as I reached her, my arm wrapping protectively around her shoulders. "Daddy, am I in trouble?" Her voice was so soft I almost missed it. "Never you," I whispered, pressing a kiss to her head. My jaw tightened, my patience thinned. Karen snapped her phone shut with a smirk. "You're finished. You'll be arrested for trespassing, and your brat won't be welcome here anymore. This neighborhood has standards." That was when I smiled, slowly, calmly, the kind of smile that doesn't come from humor but from knowing a truth the other person can't yet see. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," I said, my voice quiet enough to force her to lean in. For a split second, I gave her a chance to back down. She didn't take it. She laughed instead, mocking, sharp. "And what exactly can you do?" The answer didn't come from me. It came from the sound of a squad car turning the corner, lights flashing, tires crunching against the pavement. Parents stiffened, children hushed, and Karen's smirk widened. She thought she'd won. She pointed at me dramatically, her voice booming like a judge passing sentence. "There, that's him. Arrest him right now." The officer stepped out. His gaze flicked from me to her and back again. Then, with a voice that silenced the entire block, he said, "Ma'am, step aside, that's my chief." And just like that, the air shifted. The crowd froze, jaws dropping in perfect unison. Kids stared like they'd just witnessed a twist ending in a movie. Karen's finger hung in the air, trembling. Her mouth opened, then closed again, words swallowed before they could leave. And I stood there, my daughter clinging to me, watching as Karen's empire of noise began to crumble piece by piece, right in front of the people she had ruled by fear. Karen's face drained of color, the smirk vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. The officer's words hung heavy in the air, thick enough to silence even the whispers. "My chief," she stammered, her voice suddenly small. Parents exchanged stunned looks. Some even gasped aloud. The kids leaned in closer to their mothers, whispering questions too soft to carry. And me? I didn't have to say a word. Her lie had just exposed itself, and the truth was louder than any accusation she could ever throw at me. The deputy walked past her like she was nothing more than an obstacle on the sidewalk. His boots struck the pavement with a finality that echoed in the stillness. He looked straight at me, shoulders squared, tone sharp with respect. "Chief, you all right? We got your message." I gave a single nod. "I'm fine, my daughter's fine, that's what matters." But Karen wasn't done, not yet. She stumbled forward, hands flailing, desperation replacing arrogance. "Wait, no, you don't understand. He's dangerous. He doesn't even live here. He's lying to all of you." Her words cracked, voice climbing into hysteria. The crowd shifted uneasily. Phones were out now, cameras recording every flicker of her unraveling performance. Parents who had once looked away now watched closely, hungry for the truth. I tilted my head, letting her drown in her own noise before I finally spoke. Calm, steady, unshakable. "A threat," I said, my voice low but carrying enough weight for every parent to hear. "You screamed at my child, tried to ban her from her own school bus, lied to the police about me, and now you want to pretend you're the victim." Gasps rippled like a wave across the sidewalk. Karen spun in a frantic circle, realizing the tide had turned. "Stop filming, you can't record me without permission," she barked, her voice snapping at the parents. But the phones stayed raised. No one listened anymore. The deputy stepped in, his presence towering beside her. "Ma'am, you filed a false police report. That's a crime. And harassing a minor," his eyes narrowed. "That's another." Karen's hand trembled as she clutched the paper she'd been waving earlier, her so-called official notice. She lifted it like a shield, voice cracking. No, you don't understand. I'm part of the HOA. I have authority here. This is legal." I stepped closer, lowering my tone so only she and the nearest parents could hear. "There is no HOA here, Karen. You printed that on your computer." Her eyes widened, a flicker of panic breaking through her mask. She hadn't expected me to know. She hadn't expected the truth to be so simple, so devastating. And now everyone else knew too. One of the moms near the front of the crowd leaned in, pulling her phone closer to zoom in on the paper. "She really did just type this up," she muttered, her voice loud enough for the parents to hear. "There's not even a seal, not even a signature." The murmurs grew, sharper now. Parents shook their heads, some muttering under their breath. For the first time, the wall around Karen cracked, not because of me, but because the people she once controlled no longer believed her. Her voice faltered. "It's real. You don't understand. I'm protecting this neighborhood from people like him." She jabbed her finger at me again, but now it shook, more pleading than commanding. I crouched down beside my daughter, brushing the hair gently from her forehead. She looked up at me, fear still lingering in her eyes. "Sweetheart," I whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, "remember what I told you. Bullies always yell the loudest before they fall silent." Her lips curled into the faintest smile. And in that moment I knew this wasn't just about me. This was about showing her what strength really looks like. I rose back to my full height, the deputy stepping closer to Karen, his notepad open. He snatched the paper from her hands, scanning it quickly. His brow furrowed, his tone sharp as a blade. "Chief's right, this isn't legal, this is fraud. And pretending to be law enforcement on that phone call?" He looked up, eyes locking on her with ice. "That's impersonation. Do you realize how serious that is?" Karen's voice shrank to a whisper. No, you can't arrest me. I was just trying to keep things the way they should be." I folded my arms, my voice steady but heavy with the weight of truth. "The way you think they should be. But here's the reality, Karen, this neighborhood doesn't answer to you. And neither do I." The crowd stirred, voices rising now with courage they hadn't found before. Someone even called out, "About time somebody stood up to her." Heads nodded, fear dissolved, respect shifted. Karen's face turned crimson. She searched the crowd for an ally but found none. She was cornered, her lies exposed. The law standing in front of her, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked genuinely afraid. Her mask of control was cracking, and the world was finally watching it happen. Corinne's bravado shattered in an instant when the deputy's hand brushed against his cuffs. Her eyes went wide, her body stumbling back as if the sound of metal alone was enough to unearth the truth she'd buried under lies. "Wait, no," she cried, clutching her handbag to her chest like it might shield her. "This is a mistake. You can't put me in handcuffs in front of all these people. I'm respected here. I run the neighborhood watch." The deputy didn't even flinch. His voice was firm, steady, without a drop of sympathy. "Ma'am, you're under investigation for filing a false police report and harassment of a minor. Step forward." The crowd drew in closer, as though pulled by the gravity of justice. Parents lifted their phones higher, recording every second. Some whispered in disbelief. Others chuckled under their breath, finally watching the queen of intimidation stumble from her throne. Beside me, my daughter tugged on my sleeve. Her small voice trembled, but her words carried a wisdom far older than her years. "Daddy, everyone's finally seeing what she really is." I squeezed her hand gently, pride swelling in my chest. She wasn't just witnessing justice. She was learning that courage and truth eventually cut louder than fear. Corinne's desperation flared one last time. She spun toward me, her voice trembling but sharp with venom. "You're ruining me. Do you know who my husband is? He's on the city council. He'll destroy your career. He'll have you fired before you even make it home tonight." I leaned in, lowering my voice so only she could hear. But I knew the cameras were close enough to capture every syllable. "Then he already knows who I am, Corinne. And if he's watching, he knows this too. I don't scare easy. And I don't tolerate anyone hurting kids, especially mine." Her knees wobbled, the fight in her eyes dimmed. The deputy stepped forward, firm but not cruel. He took her wrists gently but with unshakable authority. The metallic click of the cuffs echoed through the silence like a judge's gavel. Final. Absolute. For a moment the world froze, then it erupted. Applause rippled through the crowd, hesitant at first, then swelling into cheers. Parents clapped, their voices rising, their fear gone. Children peeked out from behind legs and shoulders, their faces lighting up as though they'd just watched a monster in their storybooks finally be defeated. Corinne, red-faced and shaking, screamed over the noise. "You can't do this to me. I'm the victim here." But the words rang hollow. Nobody believed her anymore. The deputy guided her toward the squad car, her steps stumbling, her voice shrill with panic. "This is illegal. You'll all regret this. Every single one of you will regret this." But the more she shouted, the louder the laughter and clapping grew. Justice wasn't just being served, it was being celebrated. I looked down at my daughter, her eyes shining now not with fear, but with relief. She leaned against me, whispering softly, almost to herself. "Bullies always yell the loudest before they fall silent." A smile tugged at the corner of my lips. She'd remembered. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about protecting her. It was about showing her and every child standing there that power doesn't come from volume, it comes from truth. Corinne twisted in the deputy's grip, her voice cracking under the weight of her downfall. "This isn't fair. I was protecting this neighborhood." I stepped forward, letting my voice cut through the chaos, calm but sharp. "Protecting it. By lying, by terrorizing children, by inventing authority you never had." The crowd hushed, listening. My words weren't just for her anymore. They were for everyone who had lived in her shadow, for every parent who had once bitten their tongue. This neighborhood doesn't need fear to survive. It needs decency. It needs honesty. It needs people willing to stand up for what's right, not people who shout the loudest to cover up their lies. Murmurs of agreement swept through the parents. Some nodded, some even clapped harder. And Corinne, she couldn't look at me, not anymore. The deputy opened the cruiser door, guiding her inside. She thrashed, kicked, pleaded. But nothing could change what everyone had already seen. Her empire of control had collapsed in broad daylight. The crowd began to disperse, parents pulling their kids close, whispering to them, explaining what had just happened. But their eyes carried something different now. Respect. Gratitude. A silent acknowledgement that fear no longer ruled this block. I stood still for a moment, my arm still wrapped around my daughter, the sound of Karen's shrill protests muffled as the cruiser door slammed shut. Justice, not loud, not vengeful, just steady, certain. And in that moment the bus stop, once a stage for her intimidation, became something else entirely. It became the place where fear ended and truth finally took its seat. The squad car rolled slowly down the street, its flashing lights fading into the distance until all that was left was the hum of the engine and the echo of Karen's protests bouncing off the houses. And then silence. The kind of silence you don't forget. For a moment no one moved. Parents stood frozen, phones still raised but lowered slightly, as if they were unsure whether the show was really over. Kids clutched their backpacks, their wide eyes darting between me and the empty street where Karen had been taken away. And then, one by one, they began to breathe again. A mother stepped forward first, her hand pressed tightly to her chest. She looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and relief. "Chief, I don't even know what to say. We've been dealing with her for months, always threatening, always waving papers, but nobody ever had the courage to stop her." Her words rippled through the crowd like a confession everyone else had been holding in. Murmurs rose, parents nodded. Some even laughed nervously, like they were finally letting go of a weight they'd carried far too long. I didn't smile, not yet. The adrenaline was still there, simmering under the surface. My daughter's small hand was still gripping mine, her fingers tight as if she was afraid that if she let go, I might disappear too. I crouched down so we were eye level. Her eyes searched mine, still glossy with leftover fear, but there was something else there now too. Strength. "You okay, sweetheart?" I asked softly. She nodded slowly, her voice almost a whisper. "I was scared, Daddy. She was so loud, I thought maybe she was right." My heart tightened. That was the part people never saw, the way fear twists the truth until you start believing the bully's lies. I brushed her hair gently behind her ear and kissed her forehead. "Sweetheart, listen to me. Loud doesn't mean right. Loud just means scared. People like her shout the hardest when they're trying to hide how small they really are." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, a fragile one but real. She leaned into me, her head resting against my shoulder, and for the first time that day I felt the tension in her body ease. Behind us, another parent spoke up. A father this time, tall and hesitant, his voice carrying guilt. "We should have stepped in sooner. We all saw the way she treated people, but she made us feel like she had power, like we didn't have a choice." I rose to my feet and looked at him, at all of them. Their faces carried the same story, silence born from fear. I knew it well. "You always have a choice," I said quietly, my voice steady but firm. "Fear only works when good people stay quiet. Today wasn't about me being chief of police. It was about a father standing up for his daughter. Any one of you could have done the same." A hush fell again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was reflection. Sometimes the hardest truths aren't shouted. They're whispered, carried on the weight of moments that break the silence. One of the kids spoke suddenly, their small voice cutting through the grown-up tension. "Is she gonna come back?" I turned, meeting the child's worried gaze. Their parents stiffened beside them, but I gave a calm, certain answer. "No, not like this, not ever again, because now the truth isn't just mine, it's yours too, and truth doesn't disappear." The parents exchanged looks, the kind of glances that carry silent agreements. For the first time, the bus stop didn't feel like her stage anymore. It felt like ours. The crowd began to scatter, parents taking their kids by the hand, guiding them home. But this time there was no weight of fear in their steps, only relief, only freedom. As the street cleared, I stood still, holding my daughter close, the last of the sun dipping low behind the rooftops. The air felt lighter, cleaner, as if the storm had passed and left the world just a little bit brighter. And in that quiet moment, I realized something I hadn't expected. Karen's arrest wasn't just an ending, it was a reminder. That dignity doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it waits, and sometimes it shows up at a bus stop in the form of a father who refuses to let fear speak louder than love. I took a deep breath, finally letting the tension leave me. My daughter looked up at me, her eyes calm now. "Daddy?" she asked softly. "Yes, sweetheart." She smiled, not the small, fragile smile from earlier, but a full one, bright and certain. "You're my hero." And right there in that moment, nothing else mattered. The next morning, the bus stop was different. No shouting, no papers waved in the air, no parents pulling their children closer like prey hiding from a predator. Just quiet chatter, the kind of easy rhythm a neighborhood should have had all along. But under that quiet, there was still something else. Whispers, curious stares, the kind of looks people give when they finally see behind the curtain but don't know what comes next. Karen was gone, but the ghost of her voice still lingered. My daughter clutched my hand tighter as the bus pulled up, her steps hesitant on the sidewalk. I could see it in her eyes. The memory of yesterday wasn't going to vanish overnight. She looked at me as if searching for reassurance that the storm was truly over. I crouched down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "She's not coming back, sweetheart," I said softly. "You're safe." She nodded slowly, but I knew kids don't forget so easily. Fear has a way of carving itself into their hearts, even after the source is gone. As the bus doors closed behind her, I stayed a moment longer, watching it disappear down the street. My badge weighed heavier that morning, not because of duty, but because I'd been reminded of something I sometimes forget. Being chief of police didn't matter half as much as being her father. That night, the neighborhood lit up with conversations. Some parents came to my door, tentative smiles on their faces, their voices filled with gratitude. "You don't know how many of us wanted to speak up," one mother admitted, her eyes heavy with guilt. "But we were scared. She always made it sound like she had real power, like if we crossed her, she could ruin us." I nodded, I understood. Fear thrives in silence, and Karen had built her little empire on exactly that. But then came the part I knew was coming. A father, arms folded across his chest, hesitated before speaking. "What about her husband? Word is he's already making calls. He's on the city council. People are worried he'll retaliate." The air in the room grew heavier. Even gratitude carried shadows. Karen's threats hadn't just been noise, they'd been promises she fully intended to back with her connections. I looked at the small group gathered in my living room. Their faces showed hope, but also fear of a new storm on the horizon. "Let me be clear," I said quietly, my tone steady. "Nobody is above the law, not Karen, not her husband, not anyone who thinks their position gives them the right to intimidate families or children." One of the parents exhaled deeply, like they'd been holding their breath all night. Another nodded, whispering under their breath, "About time someone said it." But inside me, the weight was real. I knew her husband wouldn't stay silent. Men like him rarely did. And I knew this wasn't the end of the fight, only the end of the first battle. Later that night, after the visitors left, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of cold coffee. My daughter padded in, wearing her pajamas, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. She shook her head, climbing onto my lap. Her small arms wrapped around my chest as if anchoring herself. "Daddy, is her husband going to be mean too?" Her words cut deeper than anything Karen had thrown at me, because beneath them was the one question kids never say out loud but always think. Will this ever really be over? I held her close, pressing my chin to the top of her head. "Sweetheart, sometimes people think power makes them untouchable, but the truth is real power isn't about scaring people, it's about protecting them. That's why I do what I do, and that's why we'll always be okay." She was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "Even if they're loud." I smiled faintly. "Especially then, loud doesn't mean strong, you already know that." Her breathing slowed, her body relaxing against me as sleep tugged her eyes shut. I carried her back to bed, tucking her in carefully. Watching her chest rise and fall in steady rhythm, I felt the fire in me harden into resolve. This wasn't just about one woman at a bus stop. This was about every person who thought intimidation was a weapon they could wield without consequence. And if Karen's husband wanted to test that belief, then he'd learn the same lesson she had. Because no matter how loud the noise gets, truth always waits. Quiet, patient, ready to rise when the shouting finally burns itself out. And when it does, silence speaks louder than anything else. The calm didn't last long. 2 days after Karen's arrest, the phone in my office rang. Not the official line, my direct line, the one almost nobody used unless they wanted to make a point. "Chief," the voice said, deep and steady. "This is Councilman Harris. We need to talk." I didn't respond right away, just listened. Sometimes silence is more powerful than words. He cleared his throat, forcing authority into every syllable. My wife was humiliated in front of the entire neighborhood, dragged away like a criminal. You know how that looks? You've put my career, my reputation in jeopardy. We can't let this stand. There it was, not concern, not accountability, just image, just power. "I enforce the law," I said flatly. "And she broke it. What happened was her choice, not mine." He chuckled, a low, condescending laugh meant to needle. "Chief, I don't think you understand. Around here, perception is everything. And you made me look weak. My colleagues are already talking. Unless this situation disappears quietly, I'll make sure your office feels it." The line clicked dead before I could respond. I leaned back in my chair, jaw tight. I'd dealt with criminals, con artists, and liars my whole career. But there was something more dangerous about a man who thought his title put him above accountability. By the next morning, the whispers started again, not from Karen this time, from her husband. Parents at the bus stop spoke cautiously, their voices low. "They say the council's reviewing school zoning. I heard he's pushing to cut funding for local safety programs. What if he comes after us next?" Fear was creeping back in. Not loud and chaotic like Karen's brand, but quiet, political, calculated. That night I sat at the dinner table with my daughter. She poked at her food, her little brow furrowed. "Everyone at school talking about her," she whispered. "Some kids say their parents are scared to go against her family." I reached across, taking her hand gently. "Sweetheart, people like that only win if others let them, but fear doesn't change the truth. And the truth doesn't belong to them, it belongs to everyone who's brave enough to hold on to it." Her eyes lifted, uncertain but searching. "But what if he's louder than us?" I smiled faintly. "Then we stay steady, loud fades, steady doesn't." The next day I walked into City Hall. The corridors buzzed with murmurs, council members whispering behind closed doors. Some nodded at me, respectful. Others avoided my eyes. And then I saw him. Councilman Harris, standing tall in his tailored suit, shaking hands with colleagues like nothing had happened. His smile was sharp, calculated, but his eyes gave him away, cold, burning, already plotting. He spotted me across the hall, didn't flinch, didn't falter, just smirked like a man who believed the game was already his. But I'd seen that look before, on criminals who thought they were untouchable, on liars who thought their stories would last forever. And I knew one truth better than anyone. The higher the pedestal, the harder the fall. Later that week, I got word that Karen was out on bail, and just like that, the whispers started again. Neighbors found letters in their mailboxes, unsigned but clearly meant to scare. "This neighborhood will not tolerate outsiders. Standards must be protected." The same empty threats, different handwriting. One parent came to me in tears, clutching the paper. "Chief, what do? We can't keep living like this. First Karen, now her husband. It never ends." I placed a hand on their shoulder. It ends when we stop letting them write the story, and that starts with telling the truth, no matter how loud the lies get. But in the quiet of my office that night, I felt the weight pressing heavier than before. Not for me, for my daughter, for every child at that bus stop, for every family that just wanted peace. Because this wasn't about Karen anymore. This was about a man with power who thought fear was a currency, and I knew exactly how to bankrupt him. Sometimes battles are fought in the street under flashing lights, and sometimes they're fought in boardrooms, in whispers, in the cracks where power hides. Either way, I wasn't backing down. Not for her. Not for him. Not for anyone who thought intimidation could silence the truth. Whispers became strategy. Councilman Harris didn't storm through streets like Karen. He didn't wave fake papers or scream at bus stops. No, his game was quieter, colder. The kind of intimidation that slips into meetings and phone calls, buried under polished smiles and rehearsed charm. Within a week, new rumors circled the neighborhood. Funding cuts were being discussed. Zoning lines were under review. Programs for kids, safety patrols, after-school support, suddenly had budgets in question. It was clear he wasn't yelling, he was tightening the screws. But fear has a smell. I recognized it instantly when parents approached me, voices hushed, eyes darting over shoulders. "Chief, we can't lose the after-school program. My son depends on it. If they change the zoning, my daughter will have to leave her school." The man was using his office to wage war. Not against me, against the families who dared to clap when Karen was taken away. That's when I knew this wasn't just personal anymore. It was systemic. I sat in my office late one night, stacks of reports spread across my desk. Every false letter, every recorded call, every parent's testimony, I was building something brick by brick. A case, not in the court of neighborhood gossip, but in the court of law. Still, the weight pressed on me. My daughter lingered by the doorway, watching me work, her small face lit only by the lamp's glow. "Daddy, are they winning?" she asked quietly. I leaned back, studying her in the doorway. Her innocence deserved a world free from games like this, but here she was watching it unfold. "No," I said firmly. "They're just loud again, but remember what we said. Loud doesn't last, truth does." She tilted her head. "So you're building truth." A faint smile tugged at my lips. "Exactly, piece by piece, and when it's ready, nobody can break it." The next day, I didn't walk into City Hall alone. I had a folder under my arm, thick with documents, statements, proof, and I had allies now, parents, teachers, even a few council members who'd grown tired of Harris's tactics. The air in the chamber buzzed with tension when I stepped in. Harris sat at the long table, his posture regal, his smirk already carved in place. He saw the folder in my hands, and for the first time I caught a flicker, brief but there in his eyes, a flicker of unease. He covered it quickly with a laugh. "Chief," he said smoothly, loud enough for the room to hear, "still chasing shadows, I see." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I set the folder down in front of me, the sound sharp in the quiet chamber. Papers slid neatly across the polished wood, false notices, recordings of Karen's threats, sworn statements from parents. Every lie, every abuse of power. The room hushed, eyes shifted between us. Harris leaned forward, voice dripping with disdain. "Do you really think you can challenge me here, in my house?" I locked my gaze on him, steady, unwavering. "This isn't your house, it's theirs." I gestured toward the gallery where parents sat, the very people he'd been punishing to keep his pride intact. For the first time, he didn't smile. That night back home, my daughter curled up beside me on the couch. The folder sat closed on the table now, its weight still heavy but no longer mine alone. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice soft but certain, "you're showing them what heroes really do." I looked down at her, her head resting against my arm. Heroes. A word I never chased, but one she gave freely. And in that moment I realized something powerful. Karen had screamed, Harris had schemed, but the truth didn't need to shout. It just needed to stand. And soon it would. The council chamber was full. Word had spread, and every seat was taken, parents, teachers, neighbors, even reporters leaning forward with pens poised. The air hummed with tension, the kind that makes your chest heavy before a storm breaks. Councilman Harris sat at the center, his suit pressed, his smirk polished. Karen sat just behind him, free on bail, her eyes darting nervously toward the crowd that once bowed to her. Not anymore, not today. I stood at the front, the folder in my hands, but this wasn't about me. It was about the people behind me, the families who had lived in silence too long. One by one, parents stepped forward. Each voice added another stone to the foundation I had built. A mother describing the false letters left in mailboxes. A father explaining how their child had been terrified to go to school. A teacher recalling the intimidation at meetings. And then the recordings played. Karen's voice, sharp and cruel, echoing through the chamber. Harris's threats, calm but poisonous, whispered into phone calls he thought would never surface. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others murmured, finally. Harris's smirk faltered. Corinne's face flushed red, her hands twisting in her lap. When it was my turn, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I've worn this badge for a long time, I said evenly. And I've learned something. Power doesn't reveal character, it exposes it. My daughter was harassed, parents were threatened. Families were made to believe they had no choice but silence, but today proves something different. Fear is loud, lies are loud, but truth, I paused, letting the room breathe. Truth doesn't need to shout. Silence, heavy, absolute, until the chairman of the council leaned forward, his voice sharp. Councilman Harris, these accusations are backed by evidence. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending full investigation. Harris shot to his feet. This is outrageous. You can't do this. I am the council. His voice cracked, desperate. He turned to Corinne for support, but she shrank back, her bravado gone. Deputies moved in. Papers shuffled. Reporters scribbled furiously. And for the first time, Harris looked small, just a man stripped of the illusion he'd wrapped himself in. Corinne's voice broke the silence, trembling. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. But nobody listened. Not anymore. Her empire of noise had crumbled. As they were escorted out, the chamber erupted, not with applause, not yet. With relief. With the sound of chains snapping loose after too long. Later, outside City Hall, parents gathered around me. Some clapped my shoulder. Others simply whispered, "Thank you." But the real moment came when my daughter slipped her hand into mine, her smile steady, her eyes clear. "Daddy," she said softly, "you didn't just stop them, you showed everyone they could stop being scared." Her words hit harder than any gavel. I crouched down, meeting her eyes. "Sweetheart, remember this. Bullies don't win because they're strong. They win when good people stay quiet, and when people finally speak up." I gestured to the crowd behind us. "The noise fades, the truth stands." She nodded, her small face glowing with pride. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and crimson. The crowd slowly dispersed, but something had shifted. The bus stop would never be the same. The neighborhood would never be the same. And neither would she. Because in the end, this wasn't just about an HOA bully or a corrupt councilman. It was about a lesson carved deep into her heart. A lesson she'd carry long after the lights faded and the whispers ended. That real strength doesn't come from fear. It comes from love, from truth, from the quiet courage to stand steady when the noise tries to shake you. And sometimes, that courage looks like a little girl at a bus stop, holding her father's hand, finally unafraid. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.